Billionaires have become symbols of aspiration and controversy alike. On one hand, they represent innovation, ambition, and the success of capitalist enterprise. On the other, they stand as glaring reminders of how skewed our global economy has become. While a small group of ultra-wealthy individuals amass fortunes larger than the GDP of some nations, everyday citizens struggle with rising costs, stagnating wages, and dwindling public services. The question is not whether billionaires are good or bad. It is how their disproportionate power distorts democracy and what must be done to prevent the collapse of equitable governance. In a functioning democracy, every citizen is meant to have a voice. Yet as billionaires continue to wield outsized influence through campaign financing, lobbying, media ownership, and philanthropic agendas, the democratic ideal of one person, one vote begins to erode. Political decisions increasingly reflect the interests of the wealthiest few rather than the needs of the many. Billionaires fund think tanks that shape policy narratives, back candidates who support tax breaks for the rich, and invest in technologies that further consolidate their wealth and control. The most glaring example of this imbalance is in political donations. In the United States, just a handful of billionaires donate hundreds of millions of dollars to political campaigns, often through super PACs that obscure donor transparency. This gives them privileged access to lawmakers, regulatory influence, and the ability to shape legislative agendas. Policies on taxes, labor rights, environmental protections, and corporate regulation are all vulnerable to the preferences of the ultra-rich, even when those preferences contradict public opinion. The media landscape is also susceptible to billionaire influence. When the wealthiest individuals own major newspapers, television networks, and social media platforms, the public narrative can be subtly or overtly shaped to support their interests. Media consolidation narrows the diversity of viewpoints, suppresses critical journalism, and reinforces economic myths such as trickle-down economics or the glorification of hustle culture. This affects how voters perceive policy issues, whom they trust, and what reforms they believe are possible. Even philanthropy, often used as a public relations shield, is not without problems. While charitable giving can fund critical services and research, billionaire philanthropy often redirects public attention from systemic issues to pet projects. Worse, it allows the ultra-rich to dictate social priorities without public accountability. Private foundations are not democratically governed, yet they influence education, healthcare, and global development on a massive scale. This replaces civic engagement with paternalism, where decisions that should belong to communities are instead made by a privileged elite. The rise of billionaire wealth is also tightly linked to growing inequality. As wealth concentrates at the top, it drives up housing costs, reduces access to education, and destabilizes local economies. This economic polarization weakens the middle class and expands the ranks of the working poor. When citizens feel left behind, they lose faith in democratic institutions, which in turn fuels populism, political polarization, and authoritarian impulses. A society where billions are hoarded while basic needs go unmet is a society on the brink of collapse. Addressing the billionaire problem is not about vilifying success or punishing ambition. It is about creating a fairer, more resilient system for all. Several strategies can help rebalance power and protect democratic integrity. First, progressive taxation is essential. Wealth taxes, inheritance taxes, and capital gains reforms can ensure that those benefiting the most from the system contribute proportionally to its upkeep. Closing loopholes and tax havens would recapture billions for public investment in education, infrastructure, and healthcare. Second, campaign finance reform is crucial. Limiting political donations, increasing transparency, and establishing public campaign funding would reduce billionaire influence over elections and restore trust in democratic processes. Term limits and lobbying regulations can further insulate lawmakers from undue influence. Third, media diversity must be protected. Preventing media monopolies and supporting independent journalism ensures a plurality of voices and promotes accountability. Public media institutions should be robustly funded and shielded from political and commercial interference. Fourth, regulating corporate monopolies and tech giants would prevent billionaires from accumulating unchecked market power. Antitrust enforcement, data privacy laws, and platform accountability are necessary to curb the influence of mega corporations that dominate information, labor, and commerce. Finally, empowering grassroots movements, unions, and community organizations strengthens democracy from the ground up. When people organize, they can challenge entrenched power, advocate for policies that reflect shared interests, and rebuild the civic fabric that billionaires alone cannot replace. The billionaire problem is not hypothetical, it is structural. And while billionaires may be individuals, the systems that enable and protect their wealth are man made and reversible. To preserve democracy, society must choose collective well being over concentrated power. The solutions are known. What remains is the will to act. The health of our political systems, our economies, and our future depends on it.